There have been a number of stories in the media in recent months, as well as some misconceptions about how a record number of Americans are giving up U.S. citizenship. Today, I'm going to set the record straight. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Legally, very important word. And today I'm going to address some of the questions that some of you have asked. That isn't it true that all the U.S. embassies are closed? It's impossible to renounce. The short answer is no, that's not true. But I want to share with you an article from Axios.com, which says a record number of Americans, wealthy people it says, are renouncing American citizenship. And they show a graph, which is indeed correct, that if you believe the numbers from the federal government, that 2020 was, despite the pandemic, despite the number of embassies being closed, a record year for Americans giving up their citizenship. Now, friends and acquaintances of mine have been talking about how some of these numbers may not be accurate. The government doesn't really keep a proper list. It's notoriously inefficient. The government has even been sued under the Freedom of Information Act to get information about who is actually renouncing. But among the people that we're aware of, the numbers have been trending up. They started trending up dramatically in the Obama years. They started trending somewhat down during the Trump years after 2017. And in 2020, it hit another record. Here's the article from Axios.com. The number of Americans who renounced their citizenship in favor of a foreign country hit an all-time high, 6,707, a 237% increase over 2019, which was itself, in all fairness, a down year. Between the lines, Axios says, well, the numbers are down for this year, 2021. That's probably because many U.S. embassies and consulates remain closed for COVID-19, and are taking this grave step requires taking an oath in front of a State Department officer. That's true. You can't renounce citizenship in the United States. You've got to be out of the country. You can't simply light your passport on fire outside of an embassy. You've got to go in, you've got to go through the proper channels, you've got to pay $2,350, you've got to fill out the proper forms, and you've got to stand in front of a consular officer and do it. Why it matters, Axios says, the people who flee tend to be ultra wealthy, and many of them are seeking to reduce their tax burden. New tax and estate measures proposed by the Biden administration could, if implemented, accelerate this trend, and that's certainly true. What they don't talk about in the media is how, and they sometimes do actually, but is how the original wave of expatriations under Obama was due to FATCA. It wasn't about people not wanting to pay taxes. I know plenty of people in Europe who pay taxes in Europe, but couldn't get a mortgage, or their mortgage was going to be canceled. Their children can't get savings accounts. They can't live a normal life in a country. Often in a country they pay not that much less, or even not less at all in taxes than they would in the United States, but that scarlet letter of U.S. citizenship held them back. That was the original thing that motivated people. Certainly there are people who want to reduce citizenship to reduce their taxes, but when you consider the fact that you've got to have somewhere else to go, a lot of people who are making money these days, whether it's in cryptocurrency, or we've talked to a number of people who became successful traders during the pandemic, people who started very successful businesses during the pandemic, these people probably, unless they were born with dual citizenship or have some kind of citizenship by descent, they're going to have to rely on having a Caribbean citizenship or something that they can obtain quickly. They may or not want to give up permanent access to the U.S. And so I think the media always kind of steps over that. Certainly, it's a benefit, it's a side benefit at least, to say, hey, listen, I've got fewer things to do. But I think the media skips over that. But continuing, the big picture, only U.S. and Eritrea tax people based on citizenship rather than residence, and that's true, and quite frankly, it's unfair. For most countries, if you're a citizen but don't reside there, you aren't taxed in that country, and that's certainly becoming more difficult. Countries are becoming more difficult at allowing you to leave, but it's true. Where it stands, the IRS publishes a quarterly list of the names of people who have renounced their citizenship or given up their green cards. The numbers started swelling in 2010. Here's the mention: when FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, was passed, which increased reporting requirements and penalties for expats. I don't think the issue is penalties. That's like saying, hey, you know what? I'm really happy cocaine's going to be legal tomorrow because I've been holding off all this time. It wasn't legal, so I didn't want to do it. Now I, as the goody two-shoes of the offshore business, have never done any drugs, and I can tell you, I will not be doing drugs if they become legal. And I don't think that people who were hiding money willingly or willfully were the ones who were doing this. It was people who were living overseas who were simply inconvenienced. They couldn't live their lives. FATCA flushed people out of the bushes, the article says, but the Wall Street Journal discovered that the lists aren't up to date. A lot of people who were reported to have renounced citizenship in 2020 actually did so years earlier, so there's kind of this confusion when people are renouncing. And so the big issue that is being discussed right now is, number one, is it possible to renounce citizenship? The article is correct that you saw in 2020 and a lot of embassies and consulates closed down. If you can't get into an embassy or consulate, you can't renounce. And so certainly that set a disturbing trend, not only in the United States. Again, most people in other countries are not renouncing citizenship. But it set a disturbing trend that, is it a fundamental right to be able to give up your citizenship if you want to, for whatever the reason? And so what we've seen now is you've seen a certain number of embassies that have reopened. You have some that are accepting appointments. Some require you to be a resident. There are a limited number which accept non-residents. Some want to do it over the phone. They want to do the first one over the phone, and then you come in and do the second one. Some allow you to do the first one to the second appointment without a lot of time in between them. I think a couple want you to spend 6 months in between them. There was one embassy where it was do the first one over the phone, and then whenever we're ready to reopen for people to come in, we'll let you come in. Now, the concern was in some of these cases that other business had been resumed, but renunciations hasn't. If you go on the U.S. Embassy website for whichever embassy you want to do, generally what you need to do is you need to make a special request and then say, hey, I want to renounce, and then you talk to them and you schedule. It's not a matter of click to renew passport, come in at this date, schedule an appointment, print it out. It's easy. It's a little bit more bespoke. And so the Axios article mentions one lawyer saying there are 20 or 30,000 people who probably want to do this, but they can't get the appointment. And it's not even an issue, he says, of peak demand. It's simply that the system's capacity has peaked. Now, U.S. embassies around the world have for a long time kind of talked, the media has said, there's a secret list they don't want to talk about. They don't want to necessarily talk about, who's waiting to renounce. But again, I don't know if they necessarily even have the list because it's simply a matter of, hey, we'll let you know when we open, or call us back and see if we're open. So the estimate is tens of thousands of people potentially want to do this. There are embassies that are open, and I think that it's kind of proof that a lot of people who are renouncing are simply people who live in Switzerland or London or wherever else, because they're not looking to go to whatever far-flung place is accepting non-residents for appointments. Places like Switzerland and the UK and Canada have always had longer lines. It has always been a matter of, hey, we're busy. Whereas some of these more far-flung places, it's an issue of, hey, you want to come in tomorrow? We'll help you. And so we don't know how many people are waiting. There certainly are embassies that are open. And so you can do it. The question is this something where, it causes concern that it is more difficult to renounce? Certainly you could argue that simply having a long line, listen, if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist, we're not available to talk to you tomorrow, generally speaking. We have a line. And so I'm not going to criticize the U.S. for having a line, but what I would say is there's not nearly as many places open where you can actually renounce. You've got to really do some digging to figure out where it is that you can go and do it and where they're accepting people if you're not fortunate to be in a country where they are accepting residents. And so that to me is the issue that's worth thinking about. The article continues, be smart. The State Department strongly discourages people from severing themselves from the protections and privileges that U.S. citizenship affords. Of course they do, and that's fair. That's their job. We've talked about the fact that I think a lot of countries in the last year and a half, 2 years, have proven themselves to really not be that helpful. I've had plenty of stories and people I know who have been in other countries overseas as Americans, and they get robbed or they get beaten up or whatever, and the embassy says, oh, yeah, call us, and then they're nowhere to be found. And it's not just the U.S. that does that anymore. I think that the veneer of, for many people, the embassy is washing off, especially in large countries. I will say in smaller countries, I have had some great experiences with my citizenship and friends and employees of mine citizenship where their ambassador, their embassy has really gone the extra mile. Not so much so with these large bureaucratic embassies. And of course, Axios says not that so many migrants, dreamers, and others are seeking to obtain U.S. citizenship, kind of doing this thing where because your needs are different, because maybe you don't want U.S. citizenship, that should be canceled up by the fact that someone else wants it. Listen, your needs are different. If you're a 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur, you're probably in a different position than a dreamer. Nothing against the dreamers, but different needs require different responses. And so The article goes on and it calls out, the usual suspects, the usual rhetoric. It talks about how Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Alphabet or Google, became a Cypriot citizen. To the best of my knowledge, Eric Schmidt has not renounced U.S. citizenship, so I'm not sure that's in that. But this is kind of a general article where there's certainly some truth. There's certainly some truths being brought to light. There's also some of the traditional rhetoric. But the bottom line is, can you renounce U.S. citizenship? Yes. Is it more difficult or more time-consuming than it used to be? Yes. I believe, this is nothing particularly about the United States, giving up your citizenship or leaving your country for tax purposes or leaving your country for freedom purposes is going to become more difficult. This is why I think having second passports, having second residences, having homes overseas is important as diversification. If you're a U.S. citizen and your goals are, I don't want to pay tax in the U.S., you can have all the second passports you want. It doesn't make a difference. You're still liable for U.S. taxes. But, I think that I actually will give the U.S. some credit in this case. They are being a little bit unfairly pilloried in the sense that there's nowhere where you can go to renounce. Yeah, more difficult, still doable, requires a bit of homework. It has been an issue in our industry of people fighting with each other over whether it's true, but you can do it, and people are actually doing it, and people are renouncing successfully right now. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.